So, John Paul, take us back before real estate, man. What were you doing? How did you get into this business?
Well, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but it's true. I was a recording artist for RCA Records. I have a twin brother. We had pursued that while we were in college. And then after that, we transitioned into that. We got very lucky. We landed our first deal, and then we got a second deal.
Wow.
And then September 11th happened, and the division that we were signed to within the label was dismantled. And at this point, you know, I was like a pre-med chem major at Boston College, and now I was no longer even doing anything academically, right? It was all creative. And I just felt, I've got to do something to jumpstart. So just to help with the transition, I managed my mother's business first, which was, she had a salon business, and we managed that. Put it in perspective, she was doing $8,500 a week at the time. And then a year later, after managing it, we were doing $15,000 a week, just about. Okay. And when it came time for her to sell her business, even though I went out and got a small business loan, it wasn't sold to me. And I figured, what business could I do where if I put that much of myself into it, which I put a lot into that, helping it grow, could I get a return immediately from? You know, based on the effort that I put in, what business could I do? And I knew that I loved people. I naturally love people. That's what I live for, that interaction. And I'm a creative head, so I love the design aspect of real estate. And I said, let's try real estate. And here we are.
Okay, so I've got to ask, like, back to like the musician days, like, what type of music were you producing, and what's your specialty?
So the first deal was more like adult contemporary, believe it or not, and then it transitioned more into like this pop R&B thing. I think while the world was evolving, I think that we weren't really in that genre yet. It was a little more R&B than it was pop, and that didn't fit for the stereotype of music back then. Okay. And then we got discouraged with that part of the business and put together a rock band. And the truth is, it took like 2 years to learn how to write a good rock song, because that's not what was natural to me. So like we dove really deep into that scene and figured it out. And to be honest, I'm really proud of all of that music, right? From the more rock stuff to the more R&B stuff. Not all of it, but taking the bits and pieces of it. And I won't be singing today. Let's just be very.
Well, you anticipated my next question. Maybe for our next big event, we'll have you out. But I think what that shows, actually, I mean, what I pick up from that is just like there's an adaptability that you have to be able to adapt creatively. That's one thing. You're also, though, in the early 2000s, you're just starting to get into real estate too, and we know that the market's going to do a lot of things, and it's going to force you, I'm sure, to be to need to be adaptable. And so, talk to us a little bit, going from that salon then into real estate. When was that, and what did that first couple of years look like?
You know, it's an interesting transition, because I think had I gone right from college into real estate, the people in my circle would have continued to know me as just this professionally guided person, you know, maybe less of the risk taker and just more of the focused individual. But I had to kind of reinvent myself, right? Because I had a little crazy hair, I had a little facial hair, you know what I mean? And then they weren't seeing what was happening behind the scenes of that salon business. So I had to kind of reconvince people of the professional side of myself. And once you started doing that and showing that the work ethic was there and that the ability to transact was there, then I started to build confidence in the people that I was working with in my sphere. And so I grew that. It took me about 4 or 5 years. But once I got truly committed to the business, and still to this day, the majority of my business is referral based.
So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, because anybody, I think, getting into the real estate industry, or any new sales position for that matter, does sort of have to reinvent themselves, or at least the perception of who they are and what they do to their database, whether they're young, just out of college, or whether they're coming from another 20 or 30 year career. And I love that you just mentioned that the most of your business is still from your database and referrals. How do you actually go about the process of sort of training people over time what you're doing now and what you're up to and the new skills and resources and knowledge and experience that you have in this new industry, this new profession?
Sure. The beauty of what's happening now is it's so much easier to connect. Right now, if you're creating your social media presence and you're really committed to the cause and your vision, if you're very capable of shaping your vision on social media, right? I'm looking to show a well-polished image. I want to show that we're graphically inclined, that we're hiring the best photographers, that we're working with the best brokers, and you could really paint that story. But back in the day, you had to actually meet people, and I was just out all the time. Like I was at every chamber mixer, I was at every sponsorship, wherever I could meet people, I feel like that is the strength of who I am. Just genuinely the way I love to connect with people. Some people in this business are successful as, more introverts. That's just not who I am.
So one of my agents here at KW Arizona, he was known for forever as the car guy, right? He was big into exotic cars, and he went through a period of time trying to transition to being the real estate guy. Did you ever have to go through any of those things where like, oh, I'm going to pass on you for my real estate needs because, you're a musician and everyone in your database was seeing you as the musician. Do you remember any of that?
100%. This is going to be funny. Just as a guy, like I get a phone call for like, what should I do for the color in my hair? It's like, hey, come over. What do you think? The reality was, and I think if you're new in the business, if you hadn't achieved like large success in your previous endeavor, then people are always skeptical about investing that kind of commitment to you. It's a big number when we're selling a real estate deal, right? So they need to know that you are still sharp. And what I started to do was, I'm sorry guys, let me shut that off. I started to really send out like a weekly recap of what was happening in the market. I wanted people to know that I was informed, doing my own reports so that I became their resource. And once you become the resource, I think the rest falls into place because one person tells another and the experiences just begin to like snowball into something positive.
I absolutely love it.
I want to make sure that I'm plugged in because if this computer dies on me, I'll be embarrassed. So.
Well, I'm gonna ask you, Joe. I love that. I see a lot of agents that will take and they'll rip off market data and things like that, from a third-party resource, and they'll plug that into their email campaigns and whatnot. But don't you think that like repackaging that and taking the time to actually make it your own, and you're saying the same thing, you're regurgitating the same information, but positioning yourself as an authority, don't you think that's important?
Well, not only important, but that shows that you have the depth and understanding, right? I'm not just taking somebody else's information and copying and pasting it. I'm actually interpreting the data and what it means for the market that we've been in and the market we're going to, and how that applies then to my buyers and sellers. So it's not even just about the marketing packaging, in my opinion, so much as are you as the agent taking the responsibility of understanding what the data actually means and working on your skills to interpret that data.
Yeah, exactly. And
everything.
I think
it's absolutely everything, especially because the market data that we want is specific for the areas that we serve, right? So anyone can take a global trend, but if you're in real estate that you're the boots on the ground. You're the only one that really understands your market. Even in what we're seeing now, like the media wants everyone to believe that this market is failing, right? You've got inflation, you've got a down stock market, you just have everything pointing in this direction. But the truth is, you turn the thermostat down, it still takes time to cool off. And right. So if you're getting that advice and you're giving that buyer the advice that, hey man, it's going down, you could cheat the market. Well, you're going to still be chasing deals for the next 6 months until the market aligns with what your expectations are. And I just feel like getting in there and interpreting what we see as a sold transaction versus a pending, and then relaying that we're still seeing these deals go under at 5% over market or 10%, whatever it is at this time, is of value to our customer.
So you're in the business for the first couple of years, and you're you're in it during a run up in the market, right? I mean, like what, like '05 to '08, and then it's just tanks. Or when did it start tanking in your market?
It tanked earlier for us.
Earlier for you, okay.
I'll never forget it, getting in here to the market in September of '05. And I was like, they're like, can you do this? I was available for anything. You need an open house, I'm there. You need me to be a broker open, I'm there. And I was working these open houses, and I was going to my broker, and I was like, they're not ready to pull the trigger. And she was like, don't worry, the spring market is coming, right? And in 2006, the numbers were still high, but the transactions in our area were cut in half, literally in half. And I remember calling her in 2015. I was at a different company by that time. And I told her, I said, her name was Nikki. I said, Nikki, the spring market is finally here. It's 10 years later, but it finally got here. You know what I mean? It was so brutal. That transition was really hard to go through, especially as a new agent. But I feel that learning in that market that was constantly moving down was a big plus for me.
So talk to us about what happened then, like as that market is tanking, but as you are growing your business, I mean, what did that trajectory look like?
I could remember when I was still doing music and not able to, my wife would say, and she was my fiance at the time, she'd be like, if this is going to be our life, like you need a new career. And I was like, you know what, babe, I'm sensitive to that, so let me just stop music altogether and just dive into this. And the first year I did that, I doubled my business, right? And I was like, oh, there's something here, we're going to make this work. And the market was still going down. And by then I kind of had learned the right language skills to convince people of what was coming. And then I got to and these numbers were normal numbers for me. Like I was so proud of these numbers in the beginning. And if anyone's listening and they're new, just know that if you're growing, you should be proud. Like if your business is 1 to 2 million and then you do 4, be proud of that. If it's, for me, my goal was like, I want to get to 10 million, right? I got to 10 million and I hovered between 10 and 12 million for 4 years. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why can't I break that plateau? And I changed companies, and I will give Keller a lot of this credit. They taught me how to run my business as a business, right? They made me think of it not as a realtor or salesperson, but more as a business owner. And that, when I started diving deep into those numbers and figuring it all out, I went from 11 to 15 to 20 to 25 to 29 to 36 and then to 50. That trajectory, I get emotional even thinking about it because I never thought that I was going to get there in the time that I did. I didn't even think those numbers were possible for me. But when you're learning from people who are just doing a bigger business than you, you realize that sky is the limit. And all you've got to do is just focus in and repeat and, and revise for you, because not everything works for everyone, but find the things that work for you and really just go for it. And there we are. Here we are.
So as it pertains to thinking like a business owner and sort of being surrounded in this environment where other people are doing these things and teaching these things, what were 2 or 3 of the biggest, most important concepts that you had to sort of adopt and begin implementing that made the difference in your growth?
Well, the first thing that Keller taught me was, first of all, they give you your own leads. So that was really nice, right? You weren't out there getting listings and giving away your leads. But in terms of understanding my gross commission versus my net commission, I'll never forget one of them. We were just doing numbers based on if my business didn't grow at all. If it just stayed to where it was and I moved to a company that better supported the lifestyle that I wanted, I would have put like $80,000 in my bank account. And the broker at Keller said to me, because they're like, why haven't you left yet? You've done these numbers, you've done it. What? And I was like, because I love my broker. I was friends with my broker, and she was like, do you love your broker more than your family?
Classic.
That'll stop you in your tracks.
Right? It was like, what could I do with that extra 80 grand a year? Right. And then from there, I was taught leverage, right? And I hired a second admin, And I really started to focus on the tasks that made me money and to source out the things that took time away from me making money. That's the way to do it. They were necessary, but they took time away from the big ticket items. So that, I would say, understanding that if you have a grasp of, I take a listing, I put a sign up, I photograph it, and you understand all the costs involved with that. And then you're making sense of, okay, well, those are pretty much fixed costs if that's my business model. What can I do now to leverage that and get more business? That's the most important thing that Keller taught me, is just the growth pattern.
You've sort of touched on the two different sides of the brain a little bit, right? The creative side and the more analytical side. I'm just wondering if that's something that you just naturally have the best of both worlds, or is that what do you say to the people that either tend to lean one way or the other? Is this a skill that can be developed, and what advice do you give to those people?
It's 100% a skill that you can develop. And I believe that because we're not doing calculus here, right? We're doing multiplication and division, right? We might do percentages. Okay. It's not hard math. It's how badly do you want to be involved in that? For me, when I set the business up in QuickBooks, there's a bit of a learning curve, and maybe not everyone wants to do that. And I understand that. I don't know. I have that head, right? Like I am creative, and I don't mind, and I like numbers, and I'm a business owner. If you have time, like if you're in growth mode and you're not where you want to be financially, then you have time to learn these things. And if you don't understand them just at a very basic level, I think then you really don't understand the value in having someone else do it for you, right? So I always would encourage someone, take the time, at least learn it at a very basic level. And then you'll be able to equate the value to it. You'll put a number on it. I pay someone to check my reconciliation in QuickBooks every year. Like I need to know that. Sure.
Yeah, I think just what you mentioned, I wrote down, gross commission versus net commission. It's kind of surprising to me sometimes how agents, even experienced agents, don't actually think about the difference between a gross line and an income statement and a net line, right? And and that's why you have so many people that get into trouble when they go out and they spend their $12,000 commission check. That's not really a $12,000 commission check, and they're not reinvesting back into their business. I think that's a super. I love that you started there when you said what did I learn and what did that pathway look like, rather than just jumping right into the leverage. I mean, at the most fundamental level, that gross versus net is a conversation that people really need to be having. So I'm curious, John Paul, you start having this growth in your volume, and now you're sitting at 50 million in sales. You've got a team that's made up of both administrative and salespeople. You started to develop kind of the residential side and the commercial aspect of the business. Was that early on? Were you always dabbling in both? Or how did you make a conscious choice to get into both residential sales and commercial sales?
The market kind of pushed me that way. In 2008, when the residential market was really dropping quickly, it was very emotional for sellers, especially people if they bought high and now they had to sell. And I started to navigate the emotional journey, right? In real estate is such a roller coaster of emotions, not just your own, but your clients as well. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I could handle this all day, every day. I need to insert something where there's just a little more, oh, the numbers make sense, let's do it. And I knew that commercial was a path towards that, right? So I started to take a lot of training in commercial. I did there's a course called CCIM, which was for investment management. And I just knew that I would be able to capture that. And I also felt like if I started meeting commercial people who owned buildings, and I needed to do leasing for them, that they more than likely were of a higher net worth if they were owning real estate. And that might lead to me to get to kind of move up in the residential world as well and find people with a little more buying power. And so I felt like those two worlds could connect if I remained informed about both businesses. Because in every aspect, they say to you, oh, you need to be a specialist in order for people to really respect you or really turn to you for advice. But I thought so many of my friends, and even now my wealthy friends, are vested in more than one business. I have one guy who runs a distribution company. He also owns real estate. And here I am as a broker, considering myself to be somewhat intelligent, saying, wait, you're going to tell me that I can't do residential and commercial? I found it highly insulting. I was like, I went to Boston College. I could do this. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? And so I just made sure that I was informed. And as long as you can have an intelligent conversation about it and speak to people and meet them at their level, I think then you could win their respect and their business.
So after you did your CCIM, you got that certification. How did you start to really interject yourself into that world? How did those first couple of clients, how did you approach them? How did you find them? How did those first few deals start to domino?
Although I would say I'm confident as a person, when it comes to that business, I don't think I'm not ready to go out and try and hit a grand slam right away. So I'm just of the mindset of just start small and then grow into the role. So I just went after some landlords that had small downtown leases, nothing that's going to make or break them or myself, right? I wanted to cut my teeth on that. Just learn the language, learn the leasing process, then over time, just kind of bump it up. All right, this was a 1,500 square foot space. Now I'm comfortable going after that 10,000. And it is really about mindset because it's all the same. Right. It's all the same. You add a zero and it's all the same. But it's also for me about like that whole paralysis by analysis. I need to be 100% confident that I could handle the conversation. And so I just did it slowly. Same kind of concept, networking, going to here we have the RBA, which is like our Rockland Business Association, our Hudson Valley Economic Development. And then over on the Jersey side, because I'm right on the border here of New York and New Jersey, going to those commerce and industry events and just meeting people.
So at the end of the day, it's still just meeting people for sure.
It's always about people.
We're recording John Paul at a time in the market where, I mean, you already referenced it. The media is like giving us this firestorm of information about like, where we're going. And it would probably be ignorant of us not to recognize that things are shifting in the market. And because so much of your career took place during that big shift, I'm curious, like, what are some of the maybe tactics that you were able to employ in your business early on in that last real market shift? And then even thinking about, that quick blip in recovery that we had during COVID and the pandemic, like what are just some words of advice as we head into a new market around like skating to where the puck is going? What should other agents be thinking about, looking for, employing in their business to make sure they take market share?
One of the things I love is that I didn't see it coming the first time, right? This time my eyes are so open. Like I am so prepared mentally for the conversation. And what I would tell agents is that in your gut, you know what's happening. In your gut, you know what to say. And if you don't know what to say, then ask somebody, but be prepared, right? This is, I guess, a Keller line, right? Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Right? Having those uncomfortable conversations. You have to be the resource. I even liken it to the last 2 years. If you were a buyer agent and you were telling your client that you didn't want them to overpay and you were going to get them the best deal because you're really looking out for them, and you didn't get that property for them 2 years ago, and then they bought a year later and now they're paying even more than they would have bought just because they weren't ahead of the trend, then shame on you because you weren't following the trend, right? You have to be in front of it. And people look to us when they ask for advice, they mean it. They may not always take it, but they want to know that you're confident in what you deliver. And I'll tell someone, and I guess I'm in a position where I know that one deal isn't going to make or break my year. So I'm very much able to look someone in the eye and say, look, I'm giving you this advice because I've been here before. I have seen this market go down. And if you don't do it now and you chase it in a year or 2 years, you're going to say that I didn't push you hard enough, that I wasn't prepared because my realtor didn't let me know. Now, there is a way to deliver it. I love this book. I don't know if I love it, but I would say it's very necessary. there's a book called Crucial Conversations, which teaches you to have the hard conversation without isolating the person that you're having the conversation with, right? And they liken it to, like, you're a sales manager for a large company, and the owner of the company comes to you and says, JP, we're going to cut the budget by 25%, but we need your salespeople to still deliver for us. And then the next week, that owner who told you they're cutting the budget by 25% does a $100,000 remodel on their office. And now your sales team comes to you and says, hey, what's going on here? You're taking money away from us to make these sales, and yet he's spending money and making his office look beautiful. I'm getting a mixed message. How do you, as the sales manager, go to that owner and have that conversation without alienating yourself, but by still being a hero to your salespeople? And it talks you through the steps that you can do. And that kind of art of communication, to me, is very important. It says, like, be purposeful. Every conversation that you have, will it get you closer to your goal, right? They talk about that with your wife. Like, if something happens in your personal relationship and she did something that upset you, and you go off the handle a little bit, does that get you closer to where you really want to be? Because ultimately you want to be closer with your wife, right? You want to have that romantic and friendship relationship. So it's just being purposeful with your conversation. And I love that it broke it down so simply that it's an easy read, and I recommend it to just about everyone that I speak to.
So Crucial Conversations. All right, we'll link that up in the show notes for sure. Where do you see your business going next, John Paul?
This is such a hard question, because I'm really focused on wanting to build the brand, but you naturally deal with this insecurity as an agent. Like, if I'm focused on building the brand and maybe I'm doing less of the transacting, does that leave me out there like an island? Should say something go wrong, right? So my real focus now is I want to hire a marketing person to help with the branding and help with the growth. And then I want to hire an inside sales agent to help manage the incoming leads, because that is a process, right? And then from there, maybe transition some of my buyer agents into listing specialists, fill the void in what will happen to my buyer agents. And if I can get it from, like, we're on track right now, let's just say we've closed 35, we're under contract on 20. My goal for this year was 65 million. Like, we're going to get there, because it's not even July and we're almost where we need to be. But God, if I get to 100 million, that is a big life, and I wasn't thinking about it, but that's what I think, where I want to see it. I want to see it get to 100.
That's awesome. And let's just reframe that just a little bit. You said, if I get to 100, how about when we get to 100?
I like that. Yeah.
Well, and you're talking really in the strategy about the people development, right? You're building your bench of leverage, right? Because we know that everybody has that natural ceiling of achievement. You mentioned how you were sort of coasting between 10 and 12 million for 4 years until you then had the realization of, I need to hire some leverage. I need to get people to do parts of the role that I don't need to do, so that I can focus on the more important thing. And at this point in your business, that means hiring other agents that you can train and coach and guide into creating more sales. So with all that being said, what are some of the lessons you've learned as it pertains to the management of people, both administrators and salespeople? Some of the lessons learned, maybe even the hard way.
Yeah, I'm learning it the hard way. You really have to have a system in place. You have to hold people accountable. I thought that we were going to be doing team meetings and that would be enough. And the truth is that people need one-on-one attention. I think as the business grows, I won't be able to be that one-on-one for everyone, right? Maybe I'll just elevate a couple of people and then allow them to be the one-on-one for them. But having a plan for them and creating the vision with them. I was at a mastermind yesterday, and some of these top luxury agents were talking about creating niches for their agents, or even a geographic location. And I thought it was interesting, because I have people that maybe work a specific area and they would prefer to be dominant in that area, as opposed to, you know, going to this town or going to that town and it made me really think like, okay, how am I going to paint this picture for them? So this one-on-one attention, I think, is very important when building a team. They have to feel like you are creating, they are a part of your vision, one, obviously, but two, that you see a vision for them and you have to give them the transition steps, right? So like the buyer agent that's been with me for the longest needs to transition to become a listing specialist because she's starting to get burned out from the running around. And that's my job, right? It's my job to make them grow, even with my admins, you know, like my lead admin is now my director of operations. It sounds better, right? She feels better about it. And it's going to be a part of the growth process, right? So I just think if you don't have a system in play and you are thinking about growing, then now is the time while you have it, the time, right? Because what happens when you get busy, you just don't have the time. So make your vision, make your plan, you know, get your kind of systems in play. We have our task lists and our checklists and our systems, but do all of that now. Create your budgets now while you have the time, and then watch it go into action, right? Just check your boxes as you're going down. I reached this volume, I set aside this amount of money, I'm ready for my admin. You know, or I'm working from 8 a.m. till 11 at night, it's time for an admin. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But create your vision in advance, you know, under less stress and more purpose. That would be my biggest suggestion.
100%. Awesome. So you've referenced luxury real estate a couple times, and I'm curious, do you play a little bit more in the luxury space then? Is your team more geared that way on the residential side?
No, I mean, we the last year or two, yes, I'm finally getting into that market. You know, I was so, you know, like I pride myself on knowing like the architecture. I could go in and tell you what the stone is. You know, I know if I'm looking at an onyx backsplash, I know what the inlays are. You know, I know all that about architecture, right? So I feel like I deserve to be listing some luxury real estate. You know what I mean? Like I want to talk about these things, but it's a niche. You have to be able to connect with that group. You have to win their confidence. And the truth is I wasn't doing enough of it. I've always had a few, but I feel like now I might be more a part of the conversation. And I have been purposeful in getting us there. I also feel that when you have a team, if you can raise your average sale price, they're more likely to work with you. They feel better about it, right? When you're splitting a $700,000 or $800,000 deal with your team leader, like with me, as opposed to a $300,000 or $200,000 lead, it's an easier pill to swallow, right? Because you're seeing a bigger reward for your efforts. But don't be mistaken. Like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but from $80,000 co-ops to $8 million office buildings, we have sold everything in between this year. And I think that will remain a part of my business model. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, John Paul, this has been fun getting to know you a little bit. And I do want to transition us into the last segment of our show, which is 3, 2, 1 action. It's the segment that you've been waiting for this whole entire time. I can tell. So it's the same 3 questions we ask every guest. You ready for this?
Sure.
All right.
Here we go. Question number 1. Who is the one person that's been most influential on your business growth and how?
My business growth. I would say that was my coach. She was most influential on my business coach. I don't do that anymore, but that set the precedent for everything. She's my KW Maps coach for everything that I've been able to do now, you know? So is that good?
Yeah, it's good. I just have we don't normally do follow-up questions, but I do have a follow-up question. You mentioned you didn't do it anymore. Is a coach something that you recommend to other people that are growing their business? What are your thoughts on having a coach in general in business or in real estate?
100%. I mean, if you don't have access, like my company is really good at providing access to larger producing agents. So we get that. But if you don't have that, how are you going to learn? You're going to try and create the wheel. You know, it's so nice to know that you have that resource that can really lay it out for you. The trick is you have to be willing to put the work in. You've got to do the homework. You've got to exercise those efforts. And I didn't coach. I stopped coaching because I felt like I was disappointing my coach because I didn't get that next hire or I didn't get this. Now I'm there And I think I'll be ready for a coach again fairly soon, but just not yet.
And that ties right back to the accountability you mentioned that we sort of enforce, if you will, with our agents, right? It's also that self-accountability of growing the business forward to execute that big vision that we've been casting for all of our people. Anyway, sorry, David. I thought that was a good opportunity.
Hey, I'm all for it, man. So question number 2, and you've already mentioned one, but it could be different. What's the most influential book on your business and why?
I'm not a reader. Let me just be very clear. Okay? So, and I'm going to say something and no one's going to believe me, but it's the truth. I have not physically read through beginning to end that MREA book. But I have, okay.
Normally Gary listens to this. We'll make sure that this one skips his email.
But I will tell you that
you have not physically read through the MREA book cover to cover. That's all right. And then I think Keller Williams actually like tapped into our audio feed and cut us off.
They muted us. But the truth is that book really has been the reason why my business has grown, because it's every principle in that book. I've taken 1 million seminars and webinars about the concepts in that book through KW coaches. And I will tell you that I probably know everything that's in it from how many webinars and seminars I've taken. So that is, I would say that's my most influential.
I love it. And also Crucial Conversations is one that I have not read before. And so it's definitely something that I'm going to look up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And The Tipping Point. Have you read that one?
Oh, Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point. That's my favorite Gladwell book. I
have read that book, and that really kind of made me look at my sphere differently.
Yeah. Like
who is going to be the connector for me? Who's my maverick? Who's my this and that? And I thought and who do I want to be to my sphere? So I really loved that. That book I did read beginning to end.
Yeah, that book is epic. And actually we should do an episode just on the concepts in that book sometime.
Absolutely. All right, third and final question for you, John Paul. As you know, this is the All In Podcast where we encourage our listeners to take what they've heard here today and then go put it into action. So what's the one thing that our listeners can go do today to begin building and growing their business moving forward?
Make your plan, write your vision, and then get your systems in play now. And I'm going to talk about it in a most basic level. You want to be a listing specialist? Do you know your steps 1 to 50 about everything that has to get done in your market to crush a listing? From what photographers you're hiring, what videographers you're doing. If you don't write your copy well, do you have a content writer for yourself? What company are you using for your brochure? What are you doing for your social media campaigns? And then how are you advising in your municipal inspections, or what inspectors? I need you to know everything about whatever you want to be successful at. If you're a buyer agent, do you have your step-by-step process? Have you condensed it to a 1-page so that it's not confusing to someone? Plan your business out. Be great, be amazing. Well, I said this the other day, I've heard this before, and I'm sure you have too. There is no traffic on the extra mile, or very little traffic.
Yeah.
So few people are willing to go the extra mile. So do yourself a favor and do it.
Absolutely love it. John Paul, this has been fun. And if some of our listeners want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you and information about you that you put out?
Well, we just launched a new website, which I love, the molfettateam.com. The truth is I really hit Facebook the hardest of all of them, and Instagram. I mean, just because I'm taking what I do on both platforms there. Reach out to me however you want, send me a message. I'm here to kind of brainstorm and be a resource and help. I think the more you give, the more you get. I really believe that. So find me there.
Awesome. Very cool. Guys, this has been another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play all in.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play all in.